Welcome back to VMware View Administration Training. Let's talk real quick about the lab that we'll be using throughout this video series. But first, let's talk about some of the advantages you gain by creating a lab environment. First and foremost, it gives you the opportunity to get your hands dirty while I'm walking through these lessons with you. More specifically, while I do my walkthroughs and demo my lab environment, you have the opportunity to sit and work on your own lab environment and configure things the same way as I show you how. In addition, with all my View deployments, I've never seen one place implement every single feature. If you want to learn about every feature within View, odds are you're not going to be able to do that in your production environment. So by creating your own lab, you have the ability to exercise parts of View that you don't get to deal with in the production environment. This is key when working towards the desktop certifications for VMware, because they'll test you on all aspects of View, not just the ones that you've implemented. And finally, the best way to learn how to troubleshoot problems within VMware View is to actually break things and fix them in a real environment. Obviously, you don't want to do this to your production environment. I would highly recommend you do this only in the lab environment. So what kind of hardware am I using for my lab? I have two HP ML150 G6 servers. Each one has a single processor socket. Each one has a single processor with 4 cores running at 2 GHz on an Intel Nehalem architecture. And each of these two hosts are running ESXi 4.1. Each one has 8 GB of RAM and 3 NICs to support network connectivity, including iSCSI storage traffic, which is going to an iOmega iX4 200D. It contains 4 1TB drives that are configured in a RAID 1 configuration, which gives me 2 TB usable, which are configured in a RAID 10 configuration, providing me 2 usable terabytes. And I'm using it to serve up both iSCSI and NFS to my ESXi hosts. I also have a fully managed Netgear switch running at 1 gigabit per second that provides me many features, including VLAN tagging. Finally, my DSL router that I'm using to connect to the internet has a static IP address on it, which gives me the ability to connect to View remotely. Now let's cover the infrastructure I have in my lab environment that we won't do much modification to. It is already set up and ready for us to use. These are most likely going to be the pieces of your own infrastructure that are already set up that a View implementation won't need to affect much. First of all, I have a Windows 2008 R2 Active Directory setup that have DNS and DHCP services co-located. These are all installed on a single domain controller I've named DC01. Next, I have a 2008 R2 server hosting my vCenter 4.1 Update 1 instance, and this server is named VC01. My 2 physical HP servers both have ESXi 4.1 Update 1 installed on them, and they are named ESX01 and ESX02. I have a Windows XP client workstation running in a virtual machine called XP01. I also have a Windows 7 client workstation that's actually a physical desktop called Brian DT. Switching over to my vSphere client, I can show you that within our infrastructure folder, we have these pre-existing infrastructure pieces, including our domain controller, DC01, our vCenter server, VC01, and our XP client workstation, XP01. Now let's talk about the virtual machines that I've created but haven't done any installation on. All these virtual machines already have an operating system installed and configured on them, so we can jump directly into the application installs. The first one is our ViewCon01 server, which will be our main View connection server. I've already installed Windows 2008 R2 onto this machine. Next is the ViewSec01 server, where we'll install the View Security Server functionality. It too is a Windows 2008 R2 instance. The ViewTransfer01 will act as our View Transfer server, again running Windows 2008 R2. The VueXP parent 01 virtual machine will act as the base image for our desktop pools within Vue, and it is running Windows XP. And then we have ThinApp01, which is going to be our packaging virtual machine for our ThinApp application virtualization packages, which also is running Windows XP. Now don't worry if you don't understand what all of these different pieces are. We'll get into that in later lessons. But for reference purposes, this is what we're going to use. Now if you're interested in building your own lab, there have been several different bloggers that have written up their experiences and the type of hardware that they're using within their own lab environments. I've provided you some links to my favorite ones here. But I want you to know, you don't necessarily have to buy a bunch of servers and network switches and shared storage devices. Using a product like VMware Workstation, you can use a desktop PC or laptop in order to build this environment. You can even use products like VMware Fusion to build your environment on a Macintosh platform. If you go down this route, you need to be prepared with the proper hardware to do this. Running this many virtual machines will definitely tax the memory in most desktops or laptops. If you want to build a virtual lab, I encourage you to buy as much RAM as you can put into that machine. But it is entirely possible to build a virtual lab on a laptop. I've done that on my own laptop that has 4 gigs of RAM. It wasn't pretty, but it worked to demo Vue when I didn't have access to my main lab environment. Now don't feel like you need to have a lab in order to complete these lessons. These lessons can be completely viewed without you having to do anything else, and you will gain something out of that. But most people will agree that you gain even more knowledge and solidify the knowledge you do learn better when you actually go through the process yourself. So that's the end of the lab setup lesson. I hope you learned a little bit, and I especially hope you'll take a look at the next lesson.